Okay, so it's Saturday morning, and before the day really gets going, I'm sitting here realizing something about myself that I don't always like admitting. Perspective is everything, and yet my perspective hasn't always been very good. Surprise, surprise. When I was younger, I used to spend a lot of time thinking about what life would be like when I got older. I imagined what it would feel like to have things figured out, to have stability, to have the kind of life where you look around and think, "Yep, I got this. It worked out. It happened the way I wanted it to happen." I thought about success, I thought about freedom, a certain kind of peace that I assumed came automatically with time. And now here I am, older, closer to 60 than I ever imagined I would be, and I realized something strange. When I was young, I was looking forward to being older. And now that I'm older, I catch myself looking backwards. Think about youth, thinking about time, thinking about the things that didn't happen the way I thought they would. It's almost like the mind plays tricks on us because when we're young, we believe the future will solve everything. And when we're older, we sometimes feel like the past stole something from us. But here's the truth that's been quietly working its way into my thinking lately. The problem wasn't the future, and the problem wasn't the past. The problem was the perspective I carried into both. Because when I was younger, I imagined a version of life that was mostly built around external things: the right career, money, the right house, recognition, the perfect relationship. And I believed that once those things came together, everything inside would settle down. But that's not how it works. You can accomplish things, you can build things, you can even reach goals you set for yourself and still feel like something inside never quite landed. I've tasted success in areas of my life. I've accomplished things that the younger me would have thought were incredible. But here's something I've learned that I wish someone had explained to me earlier. Strike that. They did explain it. I just didn't listen, but that's how it goes. So the external accomplishments does not guarantee an internal peace. And sometimes it actually does the opposite. Because if you build your life trying to cover up what's happening inside of you, you can create a very impressive structure that's hiding a very restless soul. And that's what I did. And that's something I've had to confront in my own life. Now, this hasn't happened once, but many times. And one of the things I've noticed about myself recently is that some of my most peaceful moments don't happen when I'm surrounded by people. They happen when I'm alone, not lonely, when I'm alone, when it's quiet, when I'm reflecting, when I'm thinking, sometimes watching something simple that reminds me what life actually is. And this morning I was watching a video on YouTube, nothing flashy, just a person talking about their life, talking about gratitude, talking about appreciating what they have. And what struck me wasn't that their life was perfect. It clearly wasn't. They just had the same challenges that everyone else has. They have problems, uncertainty, things that don't make sense, but the perspective was different. They weren't treating life like a problem that needed to be solved before they could really enjoy their life. They were experiencing life as something that could be appreciated even while it's unfinished. And I realized something while I was watching this, and I think sometimes I take life too seriously, not in a responsible way, but in a heavy way. Like everything has to mean something huge. Like every decision has to matter at a cosmic level. Like if I don't get everything right, then something is slipping away. But maybe that's not the way life was meant to be lived. Maybe life was meant to be received more than controlled. Maybe the point isn't to wrestle the whole world into submission. Maybe the point is to learn how to live inside the moment God gave us, even when it's messy, even when it's uncertain, and even when it includes things we wouldn't choose. That realization makes me think about someone whose life continues to challenge me every time I read about him, and that person is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Here's a man who lived during one of the darkest periods in human history. It was during Nazi Germany, World War II. He went through it was oppression, war, persecution, and Bonhoeffer, he could have left. He actually had opportunities to escape, and he even had people help him. He went to New York, and then he turned around, and within, I think, 24 or 48 hours, he turned around and snuck back to Germany. He chose to go back. He chose to remain with his people. He chose to stand against evil, not because he believed it would work, not because he thought he would win, but because faithfulness mattered more than safety. And the thing that amazes me when I read Bonhoeffer's letters from prison is the peace he carried. He wasn't naive. He understood exactly what was going on, what was happening. He knew the danger. He knew the cost. And yet there was a calmness in him, a clarity, a willingness to accept what God had allowed in his life. And if you think about that for a moment, here's a man sitting in a prison cell, facing execution, living under conditions that almost none of us today would ever willingly accept. And yet he wrote about gratitude, about faith, about hope, about trusting God. And when I compare that kind of perspective to my own life, it challenges me. Because if a man in prison during World War II Germany can find peace, what exactly am I struggling so hard against? Now, I want to be honest about something. Part of the reason peace can be difficult to hold on to is because the world itself it feels very chaotic. Everywhere we look, there's conflict, there's injustice, people behaving in ways that don't make sense. Sometimes it feels like the craziest voices are the ones that get the most attention, and the strategy seems obvious. Overwhelm the system, create so much noise, so much conflict, so much chaos that the reasonable people eventually get exhausted. And when that happens, the system stops responding the way it should, because once everything becomes chaos, nothing gets properly addressed. And when you're someone who values fairness or truth or integrity, watching that play out can be incredibly frustrating because you start to notice something strange. Some people seem to get away with things that others would be destroyed for doing. The rules apply differently depending on who you are. And when you see that long enough, it can make even reasonable people start feeling a little crazy. You start asking questions like, why does this keep on happening? Why doesn't anyone stop it? Why do the worst behaviors keep getting rewarded? And if you're not careful, you get pulled into that battle emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Your attention starts getting consumed by the things you can't actually control. You begin living inside the outrage of the day, reacting to every new story, every new scandal, every new example of things that seem wrong. And before you realize it, your peace has disappeared because your focus has been hijacked by a world that runs on outrage. Here's something I've had to admit to myself recently. Sometimes the reason we feel overwhelmed isn't because the world is overwhelming. It's because we have overexposed ourselves to it. There are battles happening everywhere. Political battles, cultural battles, online battles, personal battles, and many of them have absolutely nothing to do with the life God actually placed us in. But we insert ourselves into them anyway. We argue, we react, we engage, and sometimes we even make ourselves targets by exposing ourselves to the wrath of people we never even met. People who don't know us, people who don't care about us, people who will never sit across the table from us, yet we allow their anger to invade our lives. And the strange thing is, most of us don't even realize we're doing it. We believe we're staying informed, or standing for the truth, or defending what's right. But sometimes what we're actually doing is allowing the noise of the world to replace the quiet voice of God. And that's dangerous, because when the noise gets loud enough, it becomes impossible to hear anything else. There's a place in life that many people never learn how to navigate toward. It's not a physical place, it's a posture, a perspective, a way of living. It's the place where you stop trying to fix the entire world and start focusing on the piece of the world God actually gave you: your home, your family, your friendships, your faith, your daily work, your own heart. This doesn't mean ignoring injustice. It doesn't mean pretending evil doesn't exist. It means simply recognizing the limits of your assignment. Jesus didn't heal every person in the Roman Empire. He didn't correct every corrupt official. He didn't dismantle every broken system. Instead, he lived faithfully inside the space the Father gave him. And through that faithfulness, the world has changed, not through control, but through obedience. And I think sometimes we forget that. We try to fix everything, argue about everything, carry the emotional weight of everything, and then we wonder why we're exhausted. So here's what I'm working on right now. Not perfectly, not completely, but intentionally. I'm learning to limit my exposure to things that steal my peace. Not because they don't matter, but because I'm not called to fight every battle. I'm learning to appreciate what's actually in front of me. Simple moments, quiet mornings, conversations with people I love, the small pieces of life that are easy to overlook when you're chasing something bigger. And I'm learning to hold life a little more loosely, not careless, but grateful. Because the truth is, none of us were promised a life where everything works out exactly the way we imagined. But we were offered something better: the opportunity to walk with God inside whatever life becomes. And when I think about that, when I really sit with it, something inside me relaxes. Because maybe the goal was never to create the perfect life. Maybe the goal was to become the kind of person who can live faithfully inside the life we were given. And that kind of life doesn't require perfection. It requires perspective, closing reflection. Perspective changes everything. The same life can feel empty or meaningful, depending on the lens we're looking through. And I'm realizing that the older I get, the less interested I am in chasing the version of life I once imagined. And the more interested I am in learning how to receive the life that's actually here. Not perfectly, not completely, but faithfully. One ordinary day at a time, one day better.